Hello, welcome to the Go for Ball podcast. Of course, you know I'm Big Ed Lee 42. He's Scott Mailwig at Sports 25 to Life. We're talking about hot hitters, cold hitters, the trends, who's going up, who's going down, who you should be targeting, who you shouldn't be. And once again, we have even less catchers that are eligible. Of course, we know the platoon. I mean, seems like by the end of the season, there's going to be no catchers left to talk about. But not a whole lot of anything new here as you're looking at the top. Still Stephen Vogt. Hasn't been great over the past couple of weeks. I mean, he's had a couple big games with home runs, things like that. Definitely not producing at the level he was earlier this season, but still at 308 on the season. Almost a 15% walk rate to 16% strikeout rate, so you love that. 11 homers, 39 RBIs. I mean, when he's facing a right-handed pitcher, he's still your top option pretty much every single night.
Yeah, I mean, it feels that way for sure. I mean, really, the three, maybe four guys, if you want to count Derek Norris at the top here, that are kind of 4 of the 7 playing almost every day. Vogt, Russell Martin, Buster Posey, Derek Norris. I mean, you're looking at those 4 guys most of the time. Brian McCann, you can even throw in there as a 5th one. There just aren't really a lot of platoon catchers hitting right now, and catchers in general, for that matter. I mean, we're looking at, Derek Norris is hitting 280, Buster Posey 285. Not bad. Russell Martin, 267. I mean, that's in good shape, too, but he hasn't hit a home run in a while, only 7 home runs. Obviously, in the middle of that potent Blue Jays lineup, though, with 29 runs scored, 24 RBI. All 4 of these big guys at the top here are nice. McCann's got 33 RBIs. That's probably the best part of his game right now, is just knocking in the runs that are on base right in front of him, because he's only hitting 248 on the year right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy at home against a righty. That's when you play him. When he's not at home against a righty, he's usually pretty priced out. Like, not a guy that you like to target a whole lot, but certainly in those spots, he's a guy that you look at. And I mean, Yadi Molina right there, like you mentioned, I mean, he just has 0 upside, .049 ISO, really just no upside. I've seen him in some cash games recently, and I don't blame you for playing him in cash games, but for me, he's not even really a guy that I'm looking at in cash games, to be honest with you, because he's really just not doing a hell of a lot. Like, he's a good everyday player in real life, but just not a guy I want to put my my money behind day in and day out.
Yeah, same here. I mean, nothing too special outside of, like you said, maybe if he's cheap in a cash game. Outside of that, I mean, he's not really giving you anything fantasy-wise.
No, he really isn't. So, with that being said, that's going to pretty much wrap it up for catcher. Pretty cut and dry as usual. As we move over here to first base, there's some guys that are really on fire now. Your top guy here now, no longer Adrian Gonzalez, and it's not Miguel Cabrera either. It's Paul Goldschmidt, up to 349 now. The guy is absolutely raking at the plate. 16 homers, 45 RBIs, even 8 stolen bases now.
Yeah.
Ridiculous walk rate of 18.6%. I think he's got like 11 walks in his last 4 games. Strikeout rate you're not too worried about, but ISO of 328, WOBA 474. I mean, this guy. Yeah, go ahead.
He's the only guy in the league, I think, with a 200-plus WRC plus, too, which is just a ridiculous number. I think Adrian's the only guy even close to him at 181. There's a few guys in the 170s, but it drops off immensely after that. And, I mean, that's a massive number.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, he's putting up MVP-type numbers over here right now, and he's priced like it, though, around the industry. I mean, he's the most expensive guy most nights, and I mean, for good reason, though, because it's been rare that he hasn't been paying that off recently. And Adrian Gonzalez, fresh off his time in Coors a couple days ago, he's still obviously having a hell of a season, but hasn't shown a lot of power recently. He did have 1 home run in that series, but I mean, outside of that, Miguel Cabrera below him, still having a good season, but the way he's still priced, he's really hard to play really at all outside of tournaments, because he's having good games, but I don't want to say it's like Yadi Molina, but he's a guy who's He's like every day he just gets it done, but he's not having a lot of those 3 RBI, 4 RBI, 2 double type of games. So that takes away a little bit from him.
Yeah, if you normalize that for the fact that he's a first baseman, that's a good comparison, I would say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is first base is just, you can have a really nice year and still be way behind some of these top guys. I mean, just as an example of someone like, I'm trying to look. Like, Adam Lind is having a decent year with 8 home runs, and he's hitting 281 right now. And I can't remember the last time I even considered putting him on a team.
Yeah.
And he's priced pretty low. I mean, it's just first base is so stacked at the top with these kind of seasons some of these guys are having. I mean, there's, what, 12, 13 guys with double-digit home runs already, 7 guys hitting over 300, a ton hitting over 280. And then even some of these guys down here that aren't having great batting average seasons, like Ryan Howard, who we talked about on this podcast last week, he's right in the middle of things with 10 home runs, 25 RBIs, only playing against righties, so his plate appearances are down a little bit. But, when he's hitting 234, he's an option. I mean, even in his prime, he was barely getting to 245, 250. I'll take 234 from him all day at the ridiculously low prices he's sitting at most of the time right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And, these guys around here, you got guys like really hot hitter right now. You've got Albert Pujols, who's up to 14 home runs on the season now. He's actually up to 258, but that's on a 228 batting average on balls in play as well. So I think he's got 7 home runs, something like the last 6 or 7 games, something like that. Maybe 10 games by now. But
yeah, he's been on fire, though. The fact that he's up to 14 home runs after people were writing him off at the start of the season saying he was done, he's looked really good. And like you said, if he can get that batting average on balls in play anywhere near I think it's 308 is the league average batting average on balls in play right now. That's 80 points on that. Even if you only convert that to like 30 on the actual batting average part of that, and he's up to 280, he's having a really good year then.
Yep.
We knew he was probably going to come around at some point. It's a trend with these guys that are like, first basemen are guys that fall off because of athletic ability or whatever. We just talked about Ryan Howard as a guy that can still hit for some power. We talked about Prince Fielder early in the year, wasn't getting any power behind anything, and now he's just been crushing the ball for 3 weeks straight. All these guys have upside until they just absolutely can't hit anymore. We saw guys like Paul Konerko and stuff stick around for years when they weren't really great hitters anymore. Another guy that I think is going to, his power breakout's coming soon. Jose Abreu is at 280 right now with only 9 home runs, but 32 RBI, 26 runs scored. His batting average on balls in play is pretty normalized, but considering he has an ISO of 206 with only 9 home runs, you got to think that he's going to have a massive home run surge coming here soon, and it might be this week. They're playing. It's starting to heat up in Chicago. They have a bunch of home games in a row. All those home runs are coming at some point.
Yeah, and we saw last year, he crushed lefties. He hasn't faced a whole lot of lefties yet this season. So once he gets into some of these bad lefties, you got to think he's going to get a lot more big games. And another guy down there, Mark Teixeira, we're talking about batting average on balls in play, 197 for him. Incredibly low, but still creeping up there. He's got 16 homers now, 41 RBI, up to 241. He's one of those guys that each week we're talking about. He's slowly getting that average up, but that batting average on balls in play is really just... It's still pretty much just stuck where it is. It hasn't.
Yeah, he could pick up 100 points on that easily. And to just put that in perspective, that's 1 hit every 10 times he puts the ball in play if he's going from 200 to 300 there. And that's that's basically a hit every 2 games, which if he was getting that, he'd be one of the top DFS plays nightly right now.
Yeah. A couple other guys that are starting to get things going. Carlos Santana, 19.1% walk rate you love with him.
Yeah.
158 ISO. We were kind of hoping for bigger power numbers out of him this year. 236 batting average, but over the past month, he's been much better than he was beginning of the season. When you look down at the bottom, another guy is really hot, but he's the second worst as far as batting average goes among qualified hitters. Pretty much just against lefties, but Mike Napoli, still batting just 214, but 202 ISO, 9 homers now, 23 RBIs. He's been the lone consistent hitter in that lineup outside Dustin Pedroia over the past month.
Yeah, the Red Sox in general have had a bunch of guys up and down, and Napoli hasn't had that problem lately. He started off the season so cold that he wasn't going up and down either. He just wasn't getting hit ever, and now he's finally getting it. His batting average come around a little bit. Another guy that's way too low in batting average on balls in play. I think he'll come around for sure too, to probably 250-ish somewhere for the season.
Yeah, I agree. And Chris Carter finally got one of those double dong games. We're always chasing with him a couple days ago. 194 ISO, up to 10 home runs. Certainly not a guy you're ever playing for his batting average because it's never going to be there. Almost a 36% strikeout rate, but still showing that power, though. You got to like that. That'll pretty much wrap things up here for first base. Let's move over to second base, where you've got Jason Kipnis up at the top. here, where he's not by batting average wise, he's not the top. But I mean, if you've been playing DFS over the past couple weeks or past month, Jason Kipnis is by far the top option. Guys like D. Gordon and Jose Altuve got up to huge starts this year, been struggling recently, and then right behind him, if we want to talk hot hitters, Brandon Phillips, been absolutely crushing the ball recently. Still not a ton of home runs, just 3 home runs, 25 RBIs though, 8 steals. He's striking out only 11% of the time, so he's putting the ball in play a lot.
Yeah, he's surprisingly become like a good cash game play now, which was the opposite of what he was for like all of his career.
Yeah.
When he was just hacking for home runs all the time, and now he's like the opposite of that. He's putting the ball in play a ton, getting on base, using his speed a little bit. Not a slow guy. Too. Yeah, right. Not a slow guy, even in his advanced age here still. I mean, you mentioned Kipnis. 39 runs scored. I think he's second among second basemen in runs scored. I think he's tied for first or tied for second in RBI. It depends on what you consider Daniel Murphy, whether he's a second baseman or a third baseman. I mean, 7 stolen bases. Honestly, I think the 5 home runs are a little low. But, I mean, Kipnis has just been fantastic. And that's really even that much more impressive given how slow he was out of the gate, too, like most of those Indians, where we talked about Carlos Santana at first base. Both those guys kind of got hot at the same time, and it really buoyed a lot of their run and RBI numbers.
Yeah, and he's been hitting lefties and righties, too, which is equally impressive for a lefty. But right below that, Dustin Pedroia really starting to get it going, 303. Really starting to hit lefties. I mean, he's always hit lefties, but he was another guy started being the season, really getting it going now. Up to 8 home runs, 151 ISO. It's about what you expect out of this guy here. Another guy people have been loving playing against lefties has been pretty cheap still. Logan Forsythe, up to 283 batting average, 179 ISO. It's really nice for a middle infielder. 6 homers, 4 steals, 24 RBIs. So he's been a nice filler for your lineups recently when they're facing a southpaw.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there haven't been a ton of like really good batting average second guys that have been able to combine the batting average with the power so far this year. That's why Kipnis has been so valuable. Forsythe has done a little bit of that over recently. I mean, he's got 6 home runs, 4 stolen bases, hitting 283. He's doing that well-rounded thing that you really look for at second base because, I mean, there aren't guys that are going to give you a bunch of home runs. I mean, Brian Dozier's kind of an outlier right now with 10 home runs. There's a couple guys with a bunch of steals, D. Gordon and Altuve, but outside of that, I mean, there are so few second basemen giving you one elite category, much less giving you a couple of really strong ones.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you and I mentioned it earlier in the season. It was pretty much D. Gordon and Jose Altuve in cash games. Now it looks like you love Kipnis, Brandon Phillips. I mean, Gordon's still in play in the right situation. Same with Altuve, but Altuve's really been struggling, even against lefties recently. So.
Yeah, definitely. Colton Wong's getting into that conversation quite a bit lately too, right at the top of that Cardinals order when he's sitting like in that 2-hole. And he's been moving around a decent amount, but I mean, 33 runs scored, 25 RBI. Nothing huge in terms of home runs and stolen bases with only 10 combined, but when he's hitting 310, I mean, it's really hard to argue with playing a guy in the middle of that Cardinals lineup that just seems to find a way to produce 4 or 5 runs every night.
Yeah. I mean, like what you were saying there. I mean, it's hard to pinpoint more than one guy in that lineup, really. But they're just so productive. There's always RBI opportunities, run chances.
Yeah.
There's not those things for Robinson Cano, who I could continue to not play, and until something actually changed. I mean, he did hit 1 home run, but I mean, pat yourself on the back for that one all you want, Robinson Cano. I mean, his price is down to 2.6 roughly on FanDuel, and he's a fine cash game play, but he's still just not hitting the ball well.
No, I mean
I can't do
293 batting average on balls in play. I mean, there's nothing noticeable that you just look at and go, oh, that's going to correct itself at some point. Like, I mean, this might be what kind of hitter he is now, where he's like kind of low batting average, mediocre power. And I mean, that's when guys like that start to disappear a little bit. I mean, maybe at some point he gets it going again, but if he's not hitting massive bombs and he's only hitting 250 when his batting average on balls in play is right around the league average, I mean, there's just not a lot to like there. He's not a stolen base threat. The Mariners' offense in general hasn't been very good, and he's only got 18 RBI in the season. He's been hitting 3rd in the lineup. I mean, probably 90% of the games so far.
Yeah, 76 WRC plus, just an embarrassing season for him. So maybe he turns it around, but I probably won't be on the band. I will not be on the bandwagon to find out. I'll be trailing along, waiting for it, and then if it happens, I'll get back on. But the guy we were making fun of, Chase Utley, he's starting to get it going a little bit. Had a big game against Johnny Cueto the other day. When you see a guy who's really struggling hit a good pitcher like that, That's certainly good for their confidence. He struggled the next day against a bad pitcher in Mike Leake. But either way, that WRC plus that was hovering around 0 up to 59 now. So he's certainly starting to get it going. And the Philly offense still not very good as a whole, but certainly some guys you can target there because they are still really cheap. All right, shortstop. Finally, after all these weeks, we can say that Troy Tulowitzki is back in play. Had himself a huge week now, up to 6 homers, 28 RBIs now. Still not walking hardly at all, 3.8%. But the ISO up near 200, 195, 293 batting average. Finally, he's starting to hit the ball, and he's starting to hit it hard. So, especially in Coors Field now, absolutely worth paying up for.
Yeah, I agree. Just been really, really good. I mean, it looks like he has a lot of games at Coors over the next few weeks here. So this is what we've been waiting for. I mean, shortstop's just been an absolute wasteland, and we really needed someone to emerge like this.
Yeah, and finally he's there. So if you're looking for a guy to pay for after about 6 weeks of hating on him, finally a guy that you can consider. Johnny Peralta is just your obvious cash game play most nights. He's got a fair price. He hits for power. He gets on base. He's batting .318 on the season with a 194 ISO. So you're always considering him. Other guys that I like to target Wilmer Flores in tournaments. He's got that 160 ISO, 8 home runs on the season. I think he's an interesting play a lot of nights. And then one more guy who's somewhat getting it going, Alexi Ramirez, still only batting .226, but a .247 BABIP. 7 steals on the season now, 21 RBIs, just 2 homers. You don't expect a lot of power out of him, but in a struggling White Sox lineup, if he's getting on, stealing some bases, scoring some runs, he's pretty much min salary on FanDuel right now, so he makes for a nice filler for your for GPP. Still not a cash game play at this point, though.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, it feels like most of these shortstops are GPP plays for the most part. There just hasn't been anyone that's been like really, really consistent outside of Peralta and maybe Brandon Crawford. But I mean, his games tend to be more of that like really big game, bunch of offers in a row type of thing outside of that like 2-week really hot streak he had. But I mean, in general, like even guys like Marcus Semien and other guys like that are all up and down at shortstop. That's why it's so nice that Tulowitzki's finally producing, because you can just kind of lock him in cash games and build your lineup around him, because there's just not a lot at shortstop. I mean, we see teams running guys like the Indians are running Jose Ramirez out there almost every day still at a $184. Just skipping to the bottom here real quick. Asdrubal Cabrera and Jimmy Rollins kind of in similar boats where they've been playing every single day and were huge parts of their offenses, but I mean, they can't really do anything else at that shortstop position because there's no one else to use. I mean,
you don't want to use Jimmy Rollins every night?
I have been. I mean, I'm going to keep doing it. It hasn't stopped me yet. But
he's been priced accordingly. I mean, he's been producing considering his price most nights. I mean, when he was in Coors, he was a little too expensive, but I mean, he's still cheap.
There. Yeah, he is still cheap, and that's what keeps me playing him. And I mean, he's one of those guys that has a little bit of power, can still steal some bases. He's playing in a great offense. He'd probably have 20-plus RBIs easily if he was knocking in anyone and hitting at all.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got 15 RBI, and he's hitting .213 on the season with only 6 home runs. So, I mean, all the factors around him are still there. So, I mean, I'm going to keep playing him for a while, and hopefully he figures it out and turns it around. On the other hand, Cabrera and Ramirez, like I mentioned, I'm not quite as confident in.
No. Current Indian, ex-Indian, both those guys awful right now. I don't think I'll probably ever play Asdrubal Cabrera again as long as I live. So maybe don't quote me on that, but I don't think I'll be playing him again this season. As we move over to third base, Mike Moustakas leading the way at 317, just barely over Yunel Escobar. Both those guys just cash game plays for me. I know Moustakas, 151 ISO, but just not that guy that generally has huge games. He's been consistently good all season, but he doesn't really possess that upside, or the double dong upside, or the monster game. And he bats second, so not a great RBI position for him either. And Escobar, we know, just doesn't have much power. He's batting .316, but he's cash game play at best for me. And then you look right below that, and those are the guys you're looking at most nights. Josh Donaldson, just another hot streak for him last week. 15 homers, 39 RBIs. He's got a couple steals now, 279 ISO. And then your surprising guy there, and Matt Carpenter, who's hitting for a ton of power too at 230 ISO. None of the other numbers really surprising. 314 average, 8 homers. A little bit surprising by this point, I'd say, but 37 runs scored. It seems like every night is just, if you can afford Matt Carpenter, get him. If not, here's your other options.
Yeah, right.
Cash
I mean,
at least.
yeah, right. It's him in cash games, Donaldson in GPPs, and then Donaldson in everything when he's facing the lefty.
Yep.
It's pretty much been the easiest position there is. And then you can mix in Arenado and GPPs a little bit. Like you said, Moustakas and Escobar have been pretty strong cash game plays, also value-wise. Another one that I've been recommending a ton on our DraftKings podcast, Martin Prado, is hitting 287. Obviously, he's not a big power guy. He's around 20-20 in terms of runs and RBI. I mean, there's nothing really special about him, but he's a pretty solid 1-for-4 with a few 2-for-4 nights mixed in every week, and he gets the job done for his really cheap prices.
Yeah, and then a couple other guys. Todd Frazier still has a 316 ISO. He's been destroying the ball, especially at home against lefties, but he's got some power against righties as well. And he makes for a great turn play. He's got his batting average up to 270. He was struggling there for a little while, but I mean, really nice all-around numbers for him. 16 homers, 32 RBI, 6 stolen bases. And then whenever he's facing a lefty, you and I always talk about it, he seems to be too cheap every single time. Evan Longoria, been priced way under $4,000 on both main sites there. 144 ISO, 267 batting average. He hasn't been having a great season so far, but he's still one of the best in the game against left-handed pitching, and I'm going to continue to play him.
Yeah, I mean, at some point he's going to have one of these stretches like Frazier had over the last month or so where he steals a few bases, hits a bunch of home runs, and the Rays are hitting around him a little bit. And it's going to come eventually. Right now, like you said, I'm just locking him in against lefties for that cheap price in cash games for the most part because, I mean, he gives you a decent cash game floor there, kind of like some of those higher-up guys that we're talking about that have bigger prices. And then he gives you that upside that guys like Moustakas and Escobar and Prado and stuff like that don't have. And, I mean, he's just been a fantastic GPP play at his price, even against righties. And I think he's still a really solid cash game play right now against lefties.
Yeah, and another guy that's really good against lefties as well is Trevor Plouffe.
Yep.
191 ISO and 10% walk rate's decent. Batting 261, but 8 homers, 30 RBIs for a Twins team that everyone likes to pick on, but when they face a lefty, you got to get yourself. We already mentioned Brian Dozier, of course, a second. Dozier and Plouffe, great cash game duo there, great tournament duo even when they're facing a lefty, so you like looking at that. Adrian Beltre's on the DL now, so we'll go ahead and skip him. He's having an okay season. As you look down, a guy who's finally dropped all the way to minimum salary on FanDuel, Pablo Sandoval.
Yep.
He's just been god-awful over the past probably month. I mean, even at that price, you see a guy who you're used to being a good hitter, and you just think, oh, well, I'll just play him at min salary. Not me. I would rather just not even have a lineup spot.
Yeah,
play someone who's not playing and get my 0 rather than a -1 on FanDuel.
Yeah, he started the season really well, too, was the worst part. And he's not even really striking out that much, and that's been his problem in the past. So that's like the really weird part of what's going on with him. I'm interested to see what happens with him because he's still a young guy, and, I mean, he's struggled with chasing bad pitches and swinging too much and stuff, and that doesn't really seem to be his problem right now. I mean, he's striking out 15% of the time, but what third baseman isn't, if not more? I mean, a ton of these guys have 20% strikeout rates, so that's not really a standalone issue there. I mean, I'm hoping he comes around at some point, but he just, like you said, doesn't look good right now. Even when he's making a ton of contact, he's making soft contact, and that's not really what you're looking for. I mean, a 114 ISO right now, despite the fact that he has 5 home runs and I believe 7 doubles on the season, is like just rough.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of those situations where, and he's a switch hitter too, and now they're saying that they're going to have him focus on one side of the plate to try to get him out of this slump. So
yeah,
I mean, maybe that works, maybe that doesn't pan out. I'm not going to stick around to find out. I'll wait and see after he gets it going again. I like to think that he probably will. Like you said, he's a young guy. It's not like he's on the tail end of his career, so I think he'll get it figured out. And then all the way at the bottom, Luis Valbuena, 225 ISO. That's all you really need to know with him. He strikes out a ton, but you're not playing him to put the ball in play. You're playing him to put the ball in the seats.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, outfield. The guy who everyone was playing every single day, even through thunderstorms and hail, Mr. Jock Peterson, on fire right now, up to 17 home runs on the season. He's got 34 runs, 32 RBIs, walking 15.6% of the time at 337 ISO. I mean, Bryce Harper's having a hell of a season, but over the past week or so, it's been all Jock Peterson.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's been fantastic lately, and I mean, it looks like there's still room for improvement. He's still striking out a lot, and I mean, I'm pretty excited to see what he does over the next few years because he looks I mean, obviously he was in cores most of this week, and that always makes you look really good. But I mean, he just looks great.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I mean, there's a couple other guys with ISOs north of 300. Obviously, Bryce Harper, 379. Otherworldly numbers, 20.4% walk rate, batting 328. You know all about that. The guy that we talk about for tournaments that no one seems to be looking at, but he's having a hell of a year, AJ Pollock, batting 322 now, 173 ISO, 13 stolen bases, 7 homers, 23 RBIs, and 37 runs scored. I mean, this guy has been an elite hitter this year, and he's priced like it, but no one's realizing it. They're looking at these top names, and they see Mike Trout, Bryce Harper, Nelson Cruz, and then A.J. Pollock, and they just pick everyone but A.J. Pollock. But I think that's a mistake, especially in GPPs right now.
Yeah, the guy that everyone's been playing like Peterson was early in the week this weekend, Giancarlo Stanton, is over 300 in ISO also. He's only hitting 231 on the season, which, I mean, it's hard to say he's struggling when he has 17 home runs. But, I mean, we haven't really heard a lot about that. And he's the guy that has a 257 batting average on balls in play right now and a 31% strikeout rate, which I believe is like third among outfielders, at least qualified ones. I know Souza's way up there, too, and there's one other guy that's pretty high in the 30s there. But, I mean, he's going to have a really hot streak at some point this season, too. It might not be with home runs. He's been pretty consistent with the home runs, obviously. But at some point, he's going to have a massive average 2 or 3 weeks where he boosts his average up to 270 or something like that and starts striking out a little bit less, and it's going to be a pretty scary run there.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, he's sitting there with 46 RBIs so far. So, I mean, the fact that he's batting 231, you mentioned the home runs, you add in those RBIs. Just imagine, like you said, with the being scary, when he gets it going, he's going to put up big-time numbers in a hurry.
Yeah.
George Springer's been a popular pick recently. He's had some good games, had some bad games. More bad than good, really. Batting 227 on the year. Not a guy that you're expecting to bat 300 or anything like that, but, I mean, he's gotten it up a little bit. He was batting under 200 for a while there. 11 stolen bases, just 19 RBIs and 8 home runs. I mean, he has been leading off recently, so that's obviously going to take away from his RBI numbers, but you want to see a lot more from this out of George Springer. I know his price is starting to come down. He's under 4K on FanDuel, but if you want to play an all-around 5-tool type of player like this, you certainly want more consistent production out of him.
Yeah, he had that like 10 days where he was like pretty hot for a little while, and then he went ice cold again.
Yep.
And that's when the frustrating part is. I mean, his price, he doesn't have that time where his price like catches up to where he's actually at. For a while, he was like, there was like a 3 or 4 day period where he was like a must play, and then he immediately went ice cold, and you couldn't play him at all.
Yeah.
And so it was just like a really frustrating situation where like I was on him for a couple days where he was like 40% owned on FanDuel, I think, in cash games.
Yep.
And then I came back the next like week or whatever, and no, you couldn't even play him at his price because his price had finally caught up to what he was hitting for that hot streak, and he was going 0 for 4 every day and not getting on base, so he couldn't steal or anything like that. So he's been a pretty frustrating player all season.
Yeah, and he's been striking out a ton. I mean, there was a game a couple days ago. I had him, and I think he struck out with the bases loaded, struck out with runners in second and third. I mean, as long as he just needs to start putting the ball in play, because I mean the hits will come. Yeah. I think he's just overthinking. He's just trying to be a hero. You don't need to hit a grand slam. Now, obviously, you like it, but you just got to put the ball in play. And speaking of a guy who's not putting the ball in play, Billy Hamilton been sent all the way down to the 9-hole, and if his name wasn't Billy Hamilton, I bet you he'd be getting sent down to the minors here pretty soon. But just a 222 batting average. He's got 23 stolen bases, but I mean at 56 WRC plus. He's been horrible. He was a guy that people love to play in tournaments because of his stolen base upside, but I don't care how fast you are. If you can't get on base, you're not worth playing.
That's the thing, is that I'm assuming he's the fastest player in the major league still. I don't know for sure. Obviously, we don't have him run 60s or whatever every year, but I mean, to be that fast and have a batting average on balls in play of 250 is just outrageous to me. I mean, we've seen what D. Gordon's been doing, and he's cooled off a ton, and he's still getting on base a lot. Just because he's so fast, and that's what Hamilton's got to do. I mean, he's got 23 stolen bases on the season. If you can find a way to get on base 30% of the time, you're going to be valuable to your team, and he hasn't been able to do that yet.
Yeah, he's been a really frustrating player. I mean, I probably haven't played him in a month outside of some stacks, but now that he's in the 9-hole, I mean, that just takes away all fantasy appeal for me. So.
Yep.
With that's going to wrap things up. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe, and check out all of our great content for today and every other day at dailyfantasycafe.com.